So there's something we tend not to really think too much about, and that is the image that the UK has when people come to visit. And sometimes we've touched on this a bit. You may remember must have been a couple of weeks ago now, where we touched just briefly on the um, what happens when people come to the UK and they have a look at our train network. If they land in Manchester, that's absolutely appalling if you look at it that way. And of course, Dover isn't just a point for people to go to from Europe for goods or just travel. It's also a place where people come to visit as well. Dover is very often the first port of call for many tourist places as well. So the view of the UK that these tourists take away is important. And one of the things I posted yesterday was the fact that was a personal account of someone who had been in Cornwall recently, telling people, saying, "Look, I've been down in Cornwall recently. It's absolute nightmare. There's jobs wanted all over the place." And someone even said in a comment that they never thought a high point in their life would be waiting and getting a McDonald's hamburger, because that's just how bad it's actually gotten the employment situation down there. So how does this play when people from outside the UK come to the UK on like a holiday and that's what they're seeing? This is something we don't tend to sort of really think about, because their perception, of course, gets taken back to where they come from, and then that perception can spread, and that can do a lot of damage to a tourism industry. So today we're going to go over this piece, which I think is very, very interesting, to be honest. So as always, thank you very much to all those people for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page, a one-off donation thing called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And of course, there's the YouTube subscription thing called the Pony Club as well. You can join with that. And of course, there is the YouTube thank you button as well. So thank you very much to all those people who do support the channel in those ways. So over we go to the Kent Bylines with their piece written by I think they're like a tour guide, and they operate down there, showing mostly US tourists around the UK. And their assumption is, when we're seeing all these queues going past these, doesn't exactly send the best picture for tourists coming to the UK when they're seeing all these queues. So it begins. So I work as a professional tour guide and hold 2 blue badge qualifications for guiding in London and in southeast Kent. That's Kent, Surrey, and Sussex. And before 2020, most of my work was with cruise ships calling at Dover and groups of French school children studying at the local language schools. Both sources of work disappeared altogether with COVID-19 pandemic, and with the loss of the FMO, freedom of movement, and the requirement for passports for EU citizens, the French student work will probably never return. But the Dover-Calais cruise business has recovered well in 2022. And on Friday, the 22nd of July, cruise ships from Carnival Pride was finishing a cruise at Dover, and I was due to escort a group of North American passengers to London and take them on a sightseeing tour. The coach then would take them to Heathrow Airport for their flights home. Normally, I'd drive to Dover and park my car at the cruise terminal. However, I was not sure what time I'd be returning to Dover, as I would have to use public transport. I didn't fancy having to walk from the station to the cruise terminal to collect my car late at night. I decided on this occasion to get a train from my home station of Folkestone to the Westport of Dover Priory. As soon as I left the station in Dover, I realised that something was terribly wrong. Both Folkestone Road and York Street was solidly blocked with immobile cars and lorries. Many drivers had switched off their engines and were simply standing listily outside their vehicles. As I got near the cruise terminal, they turned right into the A20 dual carriageway. It became surreal. It was like real life seen from a day of 28 days later. All roundabouts and traffic junctions were blocked and no traffic could move in either direction. I then started passing cruise passengers, mostly elderly North Americans, struggling with their suitcases as they walked along the pavement towards the town centre. Several asked me for directions to the train station. When I got to the cruise terminal, the scene was of utter chaos. There were about 2,500 passengers on board the Carnival Pride, and a large proportion of them were milling around waiting to get home. There should have been around 20 coaches ready to transfer the passengers to airports or to take them on tours, in addition to the shuttle buses, the taxis, and running them to the central station. Only 2 coaches actually made it through the traffic, and only one other guide based in Dover, and taxis were offering to take passengers to Folkestone Central Station, but for a £50 a time. One cannot accuse the taxi drivers of profiteering, as they had no ideas themselves over whether they would actually be able to get back to Dover, as all the roads were blocked for several miles outside of town. After waiting for about an hour, and the ship's short excursion managed to take me at least 17 passengers on a tour of Canterbury, and as the coach as allotted, the excursion had arrived, but the guide hadn't. Passengers on the early flights had been advised to walk to the station, and then, when the London coaches eventually did make it to the cruise terminal, the drivers were advised to head straight for Heathrow or even Gatwick airports. No time for sightseeing. My coach was fortunately able to turn out of the cruise terminal and head along the A20. My passengers could not believe the endless queues of cars and lorries heading for the port. I was asked if this was typical. I responded that I had never seen anything like it in my life. Luckily, I was able to persuade my driver to ignore the signs to Canterbury by Hawking, which would have taken us into the logjam of the A2, and I directed him westbound to the M20 and then to the B2 808, Stone Street to Canterbury. I was able to take my group on a very pleasant guided walking tour of the city. They boarded the coach to transfer to their airport. Heading home, though, I thought, now I can get the number 16 bus and I will be able to drop me just off the road from my house. I walked to the Canterbury bus station to find the long queues of no buses running at all to Dover or even Folkestone. And while I'm waiting for a while, a number 16 bus did finally appear, but the driver said that he was going as far as Hawking, and it was impossible to get to Folkestone. So I walked to Canterbury East Railway Station, got a train to Dover Priory, and then changed there for Folkestone. In the 1920s, it would have been possible to travel from Canterbury to Cheaton Hall, near my house, in about 25 minutes by the Eland Valley Railway, but this closed in 1947, but that's another story. I couldn't believe when you'd heard all about these things, blaming everyone for the traffic chaos on the French. They were not responsible for Brexit. You didn't need to be a rocket scientist to realize it will take much longer for vehicles to cross an international frontier if every passport has to be examined and stamped. So they go on to sort of talk about this, but yeah, this is what now tourists are seeing, and you've got to think, what is now the perception that gets put forward to tourists? Well, easy. I'm not coming here again. They might have enjoyed the cruise, but they ain't coming on the cruise again. They're not doing any activities. This, of course, will have ripple effects. This will negatively affect tourism. And tourism is a big industry. And it's not just the fact, the tour guide here is probably going to end up with less work. That's certainly going to be a problem for them. But it's the fact that you've got huge long queues, chaos at the airports, chaos at ports. You've got hotels and restaurants that are hugely understaffed now because, again, most of the staff of those places came from the EU. As I said at the beginning, the message I posted yesterday about the chaos in Cornwall going on at those places. This is going to have a massive knock-on effect for our tourist industry. It really is, and it's going to cause places to close completely. And I think you'll probably see it this year. People just go, well, why even bother opening next season? It will put a lot of people off, and it will cause a lot of problems, and that tourism is going to suffer as a result. But as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a motivation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel that way. And of course, we'll see you all next time.